The Apartheid movement in South Africa was an era of segregation. People of European descent claimed to be superior to colored people. As a result, the colored population of South Africa was treated harshly and faced discrimination in all areas of life, particularly in social, economic, and political settings. To combat this conflict, the actions taken by anti-apartheid organizations such as the African National Congress and the United Democratic Front between the years of 1960 to 1993 allowed for a compromise that could clear the path for the end of the apartheid era. Closing the doors of the apartheid era. Founded by John L. Dube, Sol Plaatje, and Pixley Kaseme in 1912, the African National Congress, also known as the ANC, was a political party that was initially developed as a response to the widespread Dutch settlement in South Africa during the early 1900s. They aimed to create a non-racial and democratic South Africa. However, as the apartheid era took full swing, the ANC's efforts began to be focused on breaking this discriminatory system under the leadership of Oliver Tambo. On March 30, 1960, the ANC was banned by the South African government for its beliefs, but it continued to operate underground. Frank Chikane founded the United Democratic Front, or UDF, in order to lead large protests. It was a collection of over 400 anti-apartheid groups, which had all strongly opposed the era during the 1970s. The reason for the UDF was to oppose a tricameral parliament, which is a three-tiered assembly that controlled over the last 10 years of the apartheid era. Of the conflicts in South Africa, many were social, meaning that there were disputes motivated by cultural differences. One of these was the large-scale conflict known as the Soweto Uprising. On June 16, 1976, the organizations that would eventually join to become the United Democratic Front supported around 10,000 students in the city of Soweto for a protest against segregation. They chanted and held signs in the streets. The police stopped the students and started shooting the unarmed crowd after they refused to disperse. At the end, the protest was violently stopped. In September 1976, the government appointed the Soleil Commission of Inquiry, which found out 575 students died. Many innocent colored students died as the police opened fire at them for no valid reason. This issue was shown by the United Nations Security Council when they intervened to say that the South African government's use of massive violence against and the killings of African students and others opposing racial discrimination is not moral. This marks that the apartheid era needs to end to prevent acts like this to save the lives of the innocent. This social conflict was established due to the cultural differences regarding language. As Sam Zima looks back to the events from that day, the protest itself occurred because
for many years, blacks were learning English, but when they say that now you must try to learn everything in Afrikaans, it was difficult for the students.
This was a move intended by the government to socially isolate colored people by exploiting the fact that many did not speak the language and even more would struggle to learn it. Additionally, this would make the minority even more different from those in power, making them feel superior. Despite this, the Afrikaners continued the apartheid law. This led to multiple economic conflicts in which financial growth and monetary gain was dictated by the color of one's skin. As a result, the colored residents began to strike at work. One of these important economic conflicts was known as the Consumer Boycott of 1985 in the city of Port Elizabeth. According to a report on the consumer boycott in the South African newspaper Work in Progress, almost total community support for a series of strikes by consumers directed at the oppressors was held to ensure it took constructive direction. These were efforts taken by the UDF. They initially wanted integration of public institutions and find the end of discrimination in their workplaces. UDF took first action on discussing tactics and initiating the boycott. The first members of the boycott fixed posters around the community. As the boycott started, it went through a series of acts against white people, which included setting up protests and not buying items from white stores. Unfortunately, the boycott gave no advancements in the end of apartheid. P.W. Botha, the pro-apartheid president at the time, declared that the protesters in the UDF were a nation by force and arrested thousands of boycotters on June 12, 1986. By holding the colored people back in some way, the South African government won. Economic conflicts such as this showed the level of mistreatment of colored people in South Africa. In the eyes of the Afrikaners, however, the apartheid era helped South Africa become a leading economic power. They believe that by employing these colored people for low wages and long hours, they can maximize the profits of business. This was reflected in their GDP per capita, as between the years of 1970 to 1980, it increased by over 2,000 South African dollars. However, this reasoning is fatally wrong because they established a government that caused inflation. Between December 1979 to 1980, inflation increased by over 15%. This caused colored people to find a job with a higher pay as they no longer could support their families. Jobs in the government gave the sufficient money they needed, but were reserved for white citizens only. So colored people could not receive enough money for goods, making their lives difficult. Towards the end of the Apartheid era, political conflicts began to arise. One of these major conflicts took place in 1993 when Chris Hani, one of the ANC's underground management members, was assassinated by a man named Jan Seuss Wallace. His motive is shown when he said, "They want freedom and democracy. In a few years, that is all they will have." He didn't want the ANC to create a state where everyone would be equal. He believed that by assassinating Chris Hani, he could stop negotiations and continue ideas of white superiority. However, this set of beliefs shows the level of political mistreatment of colored people, as they are denied political freedom sanctioned by the government itself. In fact, even among the residents of European descent, a small number supported the colored people's movement. But because this incident sets precedent for actions taken by those who stand up against pro-apartheid Afrikaners, they refuse to give support. This shows the significance of how small political conflicts can influence an entire nation. After these devastating conflicts, it was clear that the apartheid had to be dismantled. It was not until 1989, when F.W. de Klerk became the new president of South Africa, that any such efforts were made. He led the National Party, which was governing South Africa at the time. From his election till 1990, he announced numerous changes in apartheid laws and freed long-term political prisoners such as Nelson Mandela. In February of 1990, the government unbanned the ANC, and Mandela took over as its leader. Just 2 years afterward, the ANC met up with the National Party to agree on the Record of Understanding, which intended to develop a timetable for establishing a constitutional assembly to remove the apartheid laws. The Record of Understanding states, to be democratically elected. This shows that before it was established, there would only be Afrikaners in the government. But with this document, the citizens can choose who is part of the government, making it more diverse. The Record of Understanding was mainly possible due to Mandela's virtue of compromise, an ideology that all conflicts can only end with a mutual compromise. He even displays these ideas in 1994 during a pre-election when he states,
"Any leader who is merely promoting the point of view of his political party is not a leader who is going to help to pull out South Africa from this mess."
Although political compromise was made, the government needed to know what the people thought about having no segregation in their communities. On April 27, 1994, a democratic election was held in South Africa. Nearly 20 political parties were involved, and for the first time, over 22.7 million people of all races voted. The results declared that the ANC received 62.65% of the vote. With overwhelming support from the people, the ANC took over the power of the government, and the doors of apartheid began to close. Social conflicts were resolved as both people of European descent and colored Africans respected each other's cultures and values more. In an economic sense, people began to view each other equally. They received the same opportunities in both workplaces and as consumers. Political disputes started to fade as both colored and white people received equal opportunities in the government. Although apartheid was legally removed, the compromise was not fully effective as racism still exists in certain places of South Africa. In many cases, the same social, economic, and political inhibitions exist today. Black students graduate at a rate of 75%, which is nearly 18% less than white students. Black citizens have a 25% higher unemployment rate when compared to white citizens. However, if we follow the same principles as the ANC and UDF did 26 years ago, we too can overcome these issues. Our actions to come regarding this will determine the quality of life for our successors.